James Lee McFarland here, brother from Harlem with a high school education. Well, now I'm going to start talking about Harlem. As you know, I started out in Jamaica, Queens, then we moved to Corona in a neighborhood that was strictly black and white. We lived in what would be considered a duplex type housing situation. And from there we moved to the Bronx into a single family house. That neighborhood now was both black and Hispanics, mainly Puerto Ricans. And now as the summer rolled around again, we always moved in the summer because this way it would be easier for us to transition into the neighborhood and also for us to get ready before school started. And I had all summer long to make up friends and acquaintances in the neighborhood, and we all got adjusted in. Now, we moved into Harlem on an avenue called Convent Avenue. Now, Convent Avenue also had a surname of the Sugar Hill area. So when you hear about Sugar Hill, that's where we lived, except we lived on the lower end of Sugar Hill. And I'll get more into Sugar Hill as we go along. Let me describe this neighborhood because this is a typical Harlem neighborhood. All of the buildings were anywhere from 4, 5, and 6 stories high. Tenements is what they called them. And in each one there could be anywhere from 20 to 30 families living in each building, with an average of about 4 to the apartments that were there. So you're talking about maybe a couple of hundred people in each building. Our side of the street, there were 5 buildings. Across the street, there were 4 buildings. Our side of the street, there were no stores on the lower level. Across the street, there were stores. Now that's where a lot of the neighborhoods were because they had commercial developments on the lower end and the people lived up over them. So on our side of the street, there were maybe 10 to 12 guys my age. We were considered pre-baby boomers because we were all born in the 40s, but not after 45 when World War II ended, when they started using the phrase baby boomers. So we were like pre-baby boomers because all the guys on my side of the street were born 41, 42, 43, 44, when I was born in 44. So here we are. Now there's about, like I said, about 10, 12 guys on my side of the street, 10, 12 girls on the other side of the street. Now when you cross the street, there were maybe 6 to 8 guys our age and maybe 6 to 8 girls our age because the lower area of a lot of those buildings had stores up under them. Now, the stores that were in our neighborhood, there was a butcher shop, a vegetable market, regular little grocery store owned by Miller. There was a dry cleaner. There was a drugstore on the corner. Now, this was a neighborhood drugstore. They were nowhere near what the CVS's and the Walgreens of today are, but there was a drugstore. If you go into the next block, there was always a liquor store, and you'd find maybe a little luncheonette or some type of eatery. In all neighborhoods, there was always an eatery that you could eat in. And if you go to the other street, one street down, there was always a bar or some kind of nightclub. And that would be throughout Harlem. Okay, where you went, you always found this same type of setup. So, it's summertime, we move in, we get settled. I want to go out and play. You know, I'm just 10 years old, and like any youngster in New York City, we played, we liked to play. We hung out in the streets because we were not indoor children in those days. And the reason we weren't indoor children was we didn't have the sophisticated or the computer or high-tech games that kids stay indoor. We didn't have the laptops and the little handheld devices that you can play all these little we had old rock'em sock'em robots. That's what we played with. Now outside, we played games that involved the street, the sidewalk, and a wall. Well, this is all we had. So we played handball. We had a little pink ball called Spalding. That was the universal ball that was used in those days. A little pink ball. It was a Spalding. It was about the size of a tennis ball, but it didn't have a fuzz like a tennis ball has on it. And you could play every game you ever thought of, you could play with that one ball. They still sell that ball. It's still a universal ball that's used mainly in urban areas because you could play stickball, handball, popsicle ball, all kind of games you played with that ball. So this was it. So when I move into there, I look up the street and there's a guy that's my age. He comes walking towards me. His name is Joe. Now, Joe eventually became really my first real best friend. But Joe walked up on me, beat me up. I said, wow, I got beat up in the Bronx and now I'm getting beat up here in Harlem. What's up with this beat up thing? But then I remembered, I'm the new guy on the block. And in those days, I'm telling you, if you moved into a new neighborhood, you're going to get beat up until you got the respect. And that's what happened. So here I am getting beat up by Joey almost every day for a week. And then I see guys across the street laughing at me and pointing, they're pointing their finger over at me and they're laughing. Later in life, I'm asking them, I said, why you guys didn't come help me? I said, man, we ain't messing with Joey. Joey was the neighborhood bully, but he became my best friend. Joey, that's just Joey. That's the way he was. So then I start meeting the other guys. I meet a guy who we call Buddy. I meet Jimmy Strong. We called him Rabbit. I meet the Amos brothers, Kenny and Terrell Amos. I meet Arnold Lubo. I meet all of these guys that lived right in the neighborhood. So we became the Convent Avenue Boys. Now, up the hill from us, at the top of the hill, was a street called St. Nicholas Terrace. That's where the basketball courts were. But we couldn't go up there per se unless we challenged them at a game of basketball. So we didn't have a basketball hoop in our neighborhood. What we had was the bottom rung of the fire escape, which is square. Now, you get a good eye in shooting when you try and throw a round ball through a square hole, and that square hole is not sitting this way, it's sitting that way. So you can become very good at shooting the round ball through the square hole. And we went on and we went on and we played all kinds of street games. And to be very, very honest with you, those were good days. You remember, I'm just 10 years old, so I'm kind of learning inner city. This is what we call inner city or urban city living. Nothing but my people. The mothers were hanging out the window. They'd see everything that went on. So you better not really do something wrong because your mama's going to hear about it. You might get fussed out or get slapped by one of them and you won't get it again when you got home. So if you walk from this end of the street to that end of the street, somebody saw you do something. So when you're that young, you're kind of on your P's and Q's because you don't know who's looking at you. And needless to say, in those days, the youngsters were kind of taught how the streets operated by the upperclassmen, I'll call them. That's the guys that are 2 or 3 years older than you. We call them the big guys, we would call the little guys. The big guys schooled you to, like, when you get in your teens, this is what you can expect. This is how you can expect to do it. We played a lot of cards. That's where I first learned how to play cards. And the one thing the big guys would always teach the young guys in playing cards. Now, listen to this. The first rule that they taught you in playing street cards was how to cheat. Why? Because their philosophy was, if you know how to cheat, you know if somebody's cheating you. That was the way of the streets, That's the way we started out. So we started out this way, and it came about, and all of a sudden you get what we used to call street smart. And I don't know where that phrase came from, that's not important, but what I learned when I was 10 years old, moving on Convent Avenue in Harlem now, was street smart. And that street smart stuck with me until today. So I'm going to kind of leave you on that note so you guys can kind of get a picture of how it was, me coming from Queens, Bronx, and now Manhattan, but in Harlem, the adjustments that I made coming up, the people that I met, the guys that I hung out with. Would you kind of digest how that was and how that would have felt to any young boy, especially a young black child in New York City with all the people that were there. And I'm going to pick up next time. I'm going to tell you about my first experience going to 125th Street, which I hadn't really known what 125th Street was about. So, James Lee McFarland, the brother from Harlem with the high school education, I'm going to leave it on you guys to kind of think about what it was like. This was 1954 when we moved to Harlem. Thank you very much. Stay tuned. More on the way. Be blessed.